Hello, VC. Welcome to another edition of Pete's CD and Vinyl World. Today, I wanted to go over my top 10 King's X songs. If you're not familiar with King's X, they're a band out of Texas. Came out in '88, I believe their first album came out. This was Out of the Silent Planet. So if you don't know King's X, hard rock trio, but have a lot of Beatles and Queen influence in their music. A lot of vocal harmonies, a lot of Beatle-esque sort of production and backgrounds. There's a lot of overdubbing, etc. in their songs. They came out at a time in the peak of hair metal, say, but they were very different. They were even on Megaforce Records, which was basically known as kind of like a thrash metal label. They were on MTV early on, had a little bit of success, but just never translated to record sales that much. They have 13 studio albums. Not sure why their last album is called 15. I guess maybe they counted their greatest hits in their live album. Maybe another, but I count 13 studio albums. Their first, I would say 6, 7 albums really have that distinctive King's X sound. Ty Tabor, their lead guitar player, is known for having this unique tone. For years, he wouldn't even reveal what type of amp he was using. Finally, he came out with it. There was some kind of obscure solid-state amp. Also uses a Fender Elite Stratocaster. They were only made from 1983 to 1984. Believe they have active single coil pickups and a little bit different than a normal Strat. It had like a sort of a bass and treble control also. So his tone is definitely very unique. Also one of the first bands to use the drop D tuning, where you tune your low E to a D. You get those sort of heavy bar chords that were popular later on with grunge. So they sort of were a big influence on grunge and sort of missed the boat on that because they came out a few years too early. So anyway, get started. Number 10 is actually from the album Please Come Home, Mr. Bulbous. It's Marshmallow Fields. To me, this has one of Ty Tabor's greatest solos. This is the last album to me that has that classic King's X sound. They released 4 albums after that: Manic Moonlight, Black Like Sunday, Org Tones, and 15. Those albums, to me, they just sound like a generic modern day rock band. In fact, one of those albums, they use a lot of loops and they try to get modern sounding. So to me, the real King's X ends at Please Come Home, Mr. Bulbous. So that's why I have to include a song from there at number 10. Number 9, I'm going to go with the first album, and the song is called King. Great rocker there. Number 8, go with Mr. Wilson, which is off their third album, Faith, Hope, and Love by King's X. This one's sung by Ty Tabor. I wouldn't say it's half and half vocals between Doug Pinnick and Ty Tabor, the guitar player. I mentioned the Beatles influence before. Ty Tabor's voice kind of sounds like a cross between George Harrison and John Lennon, where Doug Pinnick, he's black, so he has that soulful voice. So it's sort of an odd dichotomy, but it works well for them. Mr. Wilson also has some weird production stuff in it. So that's my number 9. Number 8. Number 7, I'm going to include from the album Dogman, and that's Sunshine Rain. So this album, it was their 5th album. So this came out, I believe, in 93. So this was sort of like an attempt to sound a little bit more modern and enter the grunge world a little bit. They had a semi-hit with the title track Dogman. It was on rock radio. The guitar tones were a little more grungier on this album. I believe he started using straight ahead Marshalls at this point. His tone is still there a little bit, but overall it's a really good album. But that song in particular has a lot of harmonies. That's why I like it so much. Number 6, going with Over My Head from Gretchen Grows to Nebraska. This is their second album, probably their most well-known, usually the album that most fans like the best. Somewhat of a concept album. It's a long story printed inside the liner notes. I never really grasped onto the story too much, but this album is definitely a great album. Vocally, musically. So, Over My Head, that was my number 6. Number 5, I'm going to go with Mississippi Moon from Ear Candy. So after Dogman, this was sort of their return a little bit to their previous sound. Much mellower album. Mississippi Moon is, I don't want to say country influence, but it's definitely more maybe that California Eagle sound. But I'm actually surprised that nobody's actually covered it, like a country artist or somebody, and had a hit with it. But this is sort of, it's not their last album. I would say Tapehead has a little bit of that classic sound, and Please Come Home, Mr. Bulbous. That's sort of like the end of the classic King's X sound. Number 4, from their self-titled debut album, I'm going to go with the song Prisoner. Killer guitar solo, killer chorus, a lot of trade-off vocals with Doug Pinnick and Ty Tabor. This album is pretty good. It had a semi-hit with Black Flag. It was played on MTV a lot. But again, for some reason, didn't translate. My number 2 song, again, is coming off Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. It's Summerland. Not a ballad, sort of just a mid-tempo, slower song. Great vocal harmonies, great guitar solo again. This is an album you really have to listen to start to finish to get the whole grasp of it. My number 2 is coming from their first album. It's called Goldilocks. It's probably the first song I heard from them. I heard it on the local college station in New Jersey. WSOU is 89.5. They played a lot of rock and metal. So King's X were sort of classified. They were put in that category, and I think maybe that's what held them back musically over the years. Not musically, successfully over the years, is that most of their fans were probably hard rock metal fans. They never broke into the mainstream except for their number 1 song, which is coming up. But I remember this, again, getting airplay on MTV, along with Shot of Love. Was played on Headbangers Ball all the time. You know, I guess part of the problem is, like I said previously, they were a little ahead of their time as far as their sound. They would have fit in perfectly in the 90s. They're one of those bands that people always say, oh, this band should have been made it. King's X is always at the top of the list. So their number 1 I'm going with is It's Love from Faith, Hope, and Love. This was probably their biggest hit. It was on MTV all the time. The song, I don't believe, ever translated. They had what was called an MTV hit, but that didn't translate into sales or actually a hit on the pop charts. And that was the fate of a lot of bands that people perceived as being a lot popular than they were. So that's my number 1. Again, I would check out at least their first 8 albums through Please Come Home, Mr. Bulbous. But really, I would say the first 3 especially are really good. Out of the Silent Planet, their first one. Gretchen Grows to Nebraska. And Faith, Hope, and Love. Those are their 3 best in their first 3. That's probably why I didn't do a best to worst with them, because almost the order of release was really the quality of their best albums. And then after Please Come Home, Mr. Bulbous, their last 4 are sort of in the same category, just generic rock. It's really a shame that he lost his classic tone. Now he just has a classic regular guitar tone that modern bands have. But anyway, that's my top 10 list. If you like these videos, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.